Sarah Mitchell had been planning this trip to London for months. She saved every penny from her job at the local bakery in Ohio, dreaming of seeing the famous sights she'd only watched in movies. The 28-year-old teacher had always been fascinated by British royal history, and visiting the King's Guard was at the very top of her must-see list. On that sunny Tuesday morning in July, Sarah woke up early in her small hotel room near Hyde Park. She had carefully planned her outfit the night before, a bright yellow sundress that she thought would look perfect in photos, comfortable walking shoes, and a small crossbody bag for her camera and snacks. She wanted everything to be perfect for her Instagram photos that would make all her friends back home jealous. After a quick breakfast of toast and tea at a nearby cafe, Sarah made her way through the bustling London streets. The city was already alive with tourists, street performers, and locals hurrying to work. Double-decker buses rumbled past while black cabs weaved through traffic. Sarah felt like she was in a fairy tale as she walked past the grand buildings and historic landmarks. The walk to the King's Guard post took about 20 minutes, and with each step, Sarah's excitement grew. She had read online that the guards were famous for never breaking character, no matter what happened around them. Some tourists tried to make them laugh or move, but the guards remained perfectly still like living statues. Sarah respected their dedication and planned to simply take photos without bothering them. As she turned the corner and saw the famous red uniforms and tall black hats, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. There they were, two King's Guards standing perfectly still at their posts, looking exactly like the postcards she had collected as a child. Their red tunics were spotless, their black boots polished to perfection, and their expressions were completely serious and focused. But what caught Sarah's attention even more were the magnificent horses standing beside the guards. These weren't just any horses. They were huge, powerful animals with glossy black coats that shined in the morning sun. Their saddles and bridles were decorated with gold details that sparkled as they occasionally shifted their weight from one hoof to another. Sarah had always loved horses. As a child, she had taken riding lessons and dreamed of having her own horse someday. Seeing these royal horses up close was like meeting celebrities. She could see the intelligence in their dark eyes and admired how calm and well-trained they appeared to be, even with dozens of tourists gathering around them taking pictures. One horse in particular caught her eye. He was slightly larger than the others, with a small white mark on his nose that made him look distinguished. Unlike his companions, who seemed content to stand still, this horse appeared to be more curious about his surroundings. His ears moved constantly, listening to every sound, and his eyes seemed to follow the tourists as they moved around taking photos. Sarah noticed that this horse seemed particularly interested in the people carrying food. When a family walked by eating ice cream, the horse's head turned to follow them. When a man passed by with a bag of chips, the horse's nostrils flared as if trying to catch the scent. It was clear that this particular horse had a strong interest in snacks, which Sarah found absolutely adorable. The guard sitting on this curious horse was a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. He had the same serious expression as his colleague, but Sarah caught tiny moments when she thought she saw his eyes twinkle with amusement at his horse's behavior. It was clear that he knew his mount well and was probably used to the horse's curious and food-focused personality. Sarah spent several minutes just watching and admiring the scene. She took photos from different angles, making sure to capture the beautiful details of the uniforms, the horse's tack, and the impressive architecture in the background. Other tourists came and went, but Sarah found herself mesmerized by the entire experience. She noticed that many tourists were brave enough to stand close to the horses for photos, though most were clearly nervous about getting too near such large animals. The horses seemed completely unbothered by the attention, standing calmly while people posed beside them. Their training was obviously excellent, as they remained perfectly still even when children ran by or when other tourists made sudden movements. As Sarah continued to observe, she began to notice small details that other tourists seemed to miss. The way the curious horse's ears perked up whenever someone unwrapped food. How his guard would give the slightest adjustment to the reins when he sensed his horse getting too interested in something. The subtle communication between horse and rider that spoke of years of partnership and trust. The morning sun was getting warmer and more tourists were arriving by the minute. Sarah realized that if she wanted to get close enough for a good photo, She would need to act soon before the area became too crowded. She checked her camera to make sure it was ready and took a deep breath to calm her nerves. Walking slowly toward the curious horse, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had been around horses before, but never ones this magnificent, or in such an important setting. She wanted to be respectful and not cause any problems for the guard or his horse. As she approached, Sarah could see just how impressive the horse really was up close. He was enormous, probably over 16 hands high, with muscles that rippled under his shiny coat. His mane was perfectly groomed, and his tack was clearly expensive and well-maintained. Everything about him spoke of royal quality and excellent care. The horse seemed to notice Sarah approaching and turned his magnificent head slightly to look at her. His dark eyes were kind but alert, and Sarah felt like he was sizing her up, deciding whether she was interesting or just another tourist. She moved slowly and spoke softly, hoping to show him that she was a friend who understood horses. Little did Sarah know that this particular moment was about to become the most memorable and hilarious experience of her entire London vacation. Sarah positioned herself carefully next to the magnificent horse, making sure she was close enough for a good photo but not so close that she would interfere with the guard's duties. She held up her camera and smiled her biggest smile, ready to capture the perfect shot that would be the highlight of her London album. The horse, whose name was actually Wellington according to the small brass nameplate on his bridle, had been standing in the same spot for over an hour. Like most horses, Wellington was a creature of routine, but he was also blessed with an incredibly curious and mischievous personality that sometimes got him into amusing situations. Wellington had noticed Sarah long before she approached. He had watched her taking photos from a distance and had observed the way she moved around horses, confident but respectful. Unlike many tourists who seemed nervous or unsure, this human seemed to understand horses. This made Wellington more inclined to like her, though his growing appetite was becoming his primary concern. The problem was that Sarah had made one small mistake in her outfit planning. In her excitement about the perfect photo opportunity, she had completely forgotten about the granola bar she had tucked into the small front pocket of her sundress earlier that morning. The bar was her emergency snack, wrapped in crinkly plastic and smelling strongly of honey, nuts, and dried fruit. From Wellington's perspective, Sarah wasn't just another tourist. She was a walking snack dispenser. His powerful nose, trained to detect the finest scents, had immediately picked up the delicious aroma coming from her pocket. To make matters worse, the granola bar was positioned at exactly Wellington's head height, making it almost impossible for him to ignore. As Sarah raised her camera and prepared to take her photo, Wellington's interest in her pocket reached a critical point. His nostrils flared wider as he caught another whiff of the honey-scented treat. His ears pricked forward with intense focus, and his head began to lower slightly toward the source of the amazing smell. The guard, whose name was Private James Thompson, had been partnered with Wellington for almost 2 years. He knew his horse's personality better than anyone, and could usually predict when Wellington was about to do something interesting. James felt the subtle shift in Wellington's posture and the change in his breathing that indicated the big horse was fixated on something. James tried to give Wellington a gentle squeeze with his legs, which was their signal for, "Pay attention to me, not whatever you're looking at." But Wellington was too focused on Sarah's pocket to respond to his rider's subtle commands. The smell of that granola bar was simply too tempting to ignore. Other tourists continued to move around them, taking photos and chatting loudly in various languages. Children pointed excitedly at the big horses while their parents tried to get them to stand still for pictures. Street musicians played nearby, adding to the lively atmosphere of the busy London morning. Sarah was completely unaware of the drama unfolding in Wellington's mind. She was focused on getting the perfect angle for her photo and making sure the lighting was just right. She wanted to capture not just herself and the horse, but also the beautiful architecture and the other guard in the background. "Just one more photo," Sarah said quietly to herself, adjusting her position slightly to get better lighting. As she moved, the granola bar in her pocket crinkled softly, sending another wave of delicious scent directly toward Wellington's increasingly interested nose. Wellington's head dropped lower and his muzzle began to move toward Sarah's pocket with the determination of a horse who had made up his mind about something. His movement was slow and deliberate, like a detective following an important clue. Private Thompson felt his horse's head dropping and tried another gentle correction with the reins. "Easy, Wellington," he whispered under his breath. Though he was supposed to remain completely silent during his guard duty, he could see exactly what his horse was planning, and while part of him found it amusing, he also knew he should try to prevent any tourist incidents. But Wellington was a large, strong horse with a mind of his own, and when he decided he wanted something, he could be quite persistent. The delicious smell from Sarah's pocket was calling to him like a siren song, and he simply couldn't resist investigating further. Sarah finally found the perfect angle and was about to snap her photo when she felt something warm and soft brush against her side. At first she thought it might be a gentle breeze, but then she realized something much larger was moving near her. Looking down, Sarah found herself face to face with Wellington's enormous head, which was now positioned directly in front of her dress pocket. His large dark eyes looked almost pleading, as if he was asking very politely for whatever smelled so incredibly good. "Oh," Sarah exclaimed softly, more surprised than frightened. She had been around horses enough to know that they were generally gentle creatures, but she had never had a royal horse take such a personal interest in her before. Wellington's investigation became more focused. His soft muzzle began to nudge gently at Sarah's pocket, trying to figure out exactly where the wonderful smell was coming from. His whiskers tickled against the fabric of her dress as he explored, and Sarah could feel his warm breath through the thin material. Private Thompson was now trying very hard not to smile while maintaining his professional composure. He knew he should probably intervene, but Wellington wasn't being aggressive or dangerous, just very, very interested in whatever Sarah had in her pocket. Plus, Thompson had to admit that watching his usually well-behaved horse turn into a polite but determined food detective was rather entertaining. Sarah stood perfectly still, not sure what to do. She didn't want to push the horse away and possibly cause problems, but she also wasn't sure why he was so interested in her. The realization that she had food in her pocket hadn't occurred to her yet. Wellington's exploration continued, his muzzle now pressing more insistently against her pocket. He could smell exactly what he wanted, and he was becoming increasingly convinced that the human in the yellow dress was hiding something absolutely delicious that should definitely be shared. With a hard-working royal horse, Wellington had now committed fully to his mission. With the patience and determination that only a horse could possess, he continued his investigation of Sarah's pocket. His large muzzle worked carefully but persistently, nudging and sniffing. At the exact spot where the granola bar was hidden, Sarah finally understood what was happening when she felt Wellington's warm breath directly over her pocket and remembered the snack she had forgotten about. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, partly to herself and partly to the horse who was now practically resting his enormous head against her side. "You smell my granola bar, don't you?" The moment Sarah said the words, "granola bar," Wellington's ears perked up even more, as if he understood exactly what she was talking about. His investigation became more enthusiastic, and he began to use his lips to gently grab at the fabric of her dress, trying to get closer to the source of the delicious smell. Private Thompson was now in a very difficult position. As a king's guard, he was supposed to remain completely motionless and silent, like a living statue. But his horse was clearly about to cause a scene with a tourist, and he felt responsible for controlling the situation. The problem was that Wellington outweighed him by about 200 pounds, and had decided that getting that granola bar was his top priority. Other tourists began to notice what was happening. A family from Germany stopped their own photo session to watch the drama unfolding between Sarah and Wellington. An elderly couple from Scotland pulled out their phones to record what they sensed might become an amusing incident. "Look at that horse," whispered a teenage girl to her mother. "He's trying to eat that lady's dress." Sarah tried to step slightly away from Wellington, hoping to discourage his investigation, but the clever horse simply followed her movement. His head tracked her motion like a radar dish, never losing focus on the pocket that contained his desired treat. Wellington's technique became more sophisticated. He discovered that by using his lips and teeth very gently, he could actually grab hold of the fabric around Sarah's pocket and pull slightly. He wasn't trying to hurt her or damage her dress. He was simply trying to get access to what he knew was a delicious snack that was being unfairly hidden from him. "Oh no, no, no," Sarah said softly, trying to discourage Wellington without being rude to such a magnificent animal. "That's not for horses, that's my breakfast." But Wellington was not easily discouraged. He had worked with humans for years and had learned that persistence often paid off. Many visitors had given him treats after he showed enough interest, and he saw no reason why this situation should be any different. Private Thompson made a decision that technically broke protocol but seemed necessary under the circumstances. He gave Wellington a more firm correction with his legs and whispered very quietly, "Wellington, leave it." Wellington heard his rider's command, but he was now so close to success that he couldn't give up. The granola bar was right there, just a few inches away behind a thin layer of fabric. He could practically taste the honey and nuts. With the problem-solving ability that horses are famous for, Wellington decided to try a more direct approach. Instead of just nudging at Sarah's pocket, Wellington opened his mouth slightly and very carefully took hold of the fabric right over the granola bar. He didn't bite down hard. Horses are much more gentle with their mouths than most people realize, but he did get a good grip on the material. Sarah felt the gentle but insistent pressure of Wellington's teeth through her dress and realized that the situation was escalating beyond what she had expected. Excuse me," she said, looking up at Private Thompson with a mixture of amusement and concern. "I think your horse is trying to eat my dress." Private Thompson's professional composure was being severely tested. He could see the humor in the situation, but he also knew that he needed to maintain his guard duties while dealing with his food-obsessed horse. He tried another leg signal to get Wellington's attention, but the horse was now completely focused on his mission. Wellington's investigation had revealed that the granola bar was in a pocket that could potentially be opened if he just applied the right amount of pressure in the right direction. Using his lips with the precision of a surgeon, he began to work at the edge of Sarah's pocket, trying to figure out how to access the treasure inside. The growing crowd of tourists was now openly watching and commenting on the drama. Phones came out to capture photos and videos of the royal horse who was apparently trying to undress a tourist. The situation was becoming quite the spectacle. "I think he wants your snack," said a helpful tourist from Australia who had been watching the entire interaction. "Should I give it to him?" Sarah asked, looking between the Australian tourist and Private Thompson, who was still trying to maintain his official silence and stillness. Wellington, sensing that the conversation was about him and possibly about food, increased his efforts. He discovered that by pulling very gently on the fabric while also pushing with his muzzle, he could actually start to work Sarah's pocket open. His technique was surprisingly delicate for such a large animal. Private Thompson realized that the situation was now beyond his control. Wellington had clearly decided that obtaining the granola bar was more important than following commands, and short of physically pulling his horse's head away, which would definitely break guard protocol, there wasn't much he could do to stop the investigation. Sarah felt her pocket being gradually manipulated by Wellington's persistent exploration and realized that the horse was actually quite clever. "You're really determined, aren't you?" she said to Wellington, who responded by working even more enthusiastically at her pocket. The moment had arrived when Wellington's persistence was about to pay off, and everyone watching could sense that something significant was about to happen. Wellington's patient and methodical investigation finally paid off. With one perfectly timed combination of gentle pulling with his teeth and strategic nudging with his muzzle, he managed to work Sarah's pocket open just enough to access his prize. Before Sarah could react, Wellington's lips delicately reached into her pocket and extracted the granola bar with the precision of a professional pickpocket. The wrapper crinkled loudly as he pulled it free, and for a moment the entire crowd of tourists fell silent in amazement at what they had just witnessed. "He got it," shouted the teenage girl who had been watching the entire drama unfold. "The horse actually got her granola bar." Sarah stood there in shock, watching as Wellington held her breakfast snack triumphantly in his mouth. The granola bar looked tiny between his powerful jaws, but he held it as carefully as if it were made of glass. His eyes seemed to sparkle, with satisfaction and just a hint of mischief. "I can't believe this is actually happening," Sarah said, half laughing and half amazed. She pulled out her phone to take a picture of Wellington with her granola bar, realizing that this was going to be a much better story than any posed photo she had originally planned. Private Thompson was now facing a new dilemma. His horse had successfully stolen food from a tourist and was standing there looking extremely pleased with himself. As a professional guard, Thompson knew he should probably try to get the granola bar back, but he also realized that trying to take food away from a determined horse was rarely successful. Wellington carefully adjusted his grip on the granola bar, trying to figure out the best way to eat it. The wrapper was proving to be a challenge. It tasted terrible and made annoying crinkly sounds when he tried to bite it. With the problem-solving skills that had gotten him this far, Wellington decided that the wrapper needed to be removed before he could properly enjoy his prize. Using a technique that amazed every horse person in the growing crowd, Wellington managed to bite through the wrapper at one end and then shake his head in just the right way to make the granola bar slide out, while leaving most of the plastic wrapper behind. It was a move that would have impressed professional horse trainers. "That horse is a genius," exclaimed a woman from Canada who had been filming the entire incident. "Did you see how he unwrapped that bar?" The freed granola bar was everything Wellington had hoped it would be. It was sweet, crunchy, and full of the honey and nut flavors that horses absolutely love. He chewed it slowly and deliberately, savoring every bite while maintaining eye contact with Sarah as if to thank her for the unexpected treat. Sarah couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Here she was in London, having her breakfast stolen by a royal horse who seemed completely satisfied with his successful heist. "Well, I guess you really wanted that more than I did," she said to Wellington, who continued chewing contentedly. The crowd of tourists was now actively taking photos and videos of Wellington enjoying his stolen snack. This was the kind of authentic London experience that couldn't be planned or staged. It was just pure, unexpected entertainment. Private Thompson finally made the decision to break his official silence, though he kept his voice very quiet. "I'm sorry about that," he said to Sarah, though she could hear the amusement in his voice. "Wellington has a bit of a food obsession." "It's okay," Sarah replied, grinning widely. "This is actually the best thing that's happened on my whole trip. I mean, how many people can say they've been robbed by a royal horse?" Wellington finished his snack and immediately began looking around for more opportunities. His success with Sarah had given him confidence, and he started eyeing other tourists to see if anyone else might be carrying interesting food. His head swiveled like a radar dish, checking pockets, purses, and hands for potential treats. A man, eating a sandwich about 20 feet away, suddenly found himself under Wellington's intense scrutiny. The horse's ears pointed directly at him, and his nostrils flared as he caught the scent of turkey and cheese. Private Thompson felt his horse's attention shift and tightened his grip on the reins, knowing that Wellington was now in full hunting mode. "Oh, no, you don't," Thompson whispered to his horse. "One tourist robbery per day is enough." But Wellington had discovered that stealing food from tourists was actually quite easy and very rewarding. His confidence was now at an all-time high, and he began to test the boundaries of how far his charm and persistence could take him. A family with small children approached, and Wellington immediately noticed that one of the kids was holding a bag of crackers. His head lowered toward the child in what looked like a friendly greeting, but Sarah and several other tourists who had witnessed his previous performance knew exactly what he was really doing. "Watch your crackers," Sarah called out to the family. "This horse is a professional snack thief." The parents looked confused until they saw Wellington's intense focus on their child's bag of crackers. The horse's technique was now refined and confident. He approached slowly and politely, but with clear intent. Private Thompson realized that Wellington's successful food heist had created a monster. His normally well-behaved horse had discovered a new talent and was clearly planning to use it as much as possible. The situation was both hilarious and potentially problematic. Wellington's reputation was spreading quickly through the crowd of tourists. People began warning each other about the food-stealing royal horse, and those with visible snacks started moving them out of reach or hiding them in bags. But Wellington was undeterred. He had tasted success, quite literally, and he wasn't about to give up his new career as a tourist snack inspector. His next target was already selected, and he began his approach with the confidence of a seasoned professional. The morning that had started as a simple photo opportunity was turning into an unforgettable comedy show, with Wellington as the star performer and the growing crowd of tourists as his delighted audience. Wellington's confidence was now at dangerous levels. Having successfully executed one snack heist, he began to survey his territory like a general planning his next campaign. His intelligent eyes moved from tourist to tourist, cataloging potential targets and analyzing their food-carrying situations. The second King's Guard, Private Michael Davies, had been watching the entire Wellington situation unfold with growing amusement. Davies had been partners with his own horse, Brigadier, for 3 years, and while Brigadier was generally well-behaved, he had his own moments of mischief. Davies tried to maintain his professional composure, but watching Wellington turn into a master food thief was proving to be the most entertaining guard duty he had ever experienced. Private Thompson was now in the unusual position of having to control his horse while maintaining guard protocol. Wellington was clearly planning his next move, and Thompson could feel the big horse's excitement building beneath him. Every muscle in Wellington's body was coiled with anticipation as he spotted his next target. A businessman in an expensive suit was walking by while eating a breakfast pastry. The man was focused on his phone and completely unaware that he had attracted the attention of London's newest food bandit. Wellington's head began to track the pastry like a missile targeting system. "Wellington, no," Private Thompson whispered as quietly as possible, but his horse was already in motion. Wellington had learned from his success with Sarah that a direct but polite approach worked best. He began to move his head toward the businessman, his movement smooth and calculated. The crowd of tourists, now aware of Wellington's methods, began to anticipate what was about to happen. "Excuse me, sir," called out Sarah, who had stayed to watch the continuing drama. "You might want to protect your breakfast." The businessman looked up from his phone, confused, just as Wellington's large head appeared directly beside him at pastry level. The man's eyes widened as he found himself nose to nose with a massive royal horse who was showing intense interest in his Danish pastry. "What the?" the businessman started to say, but Wellington was already in action. With the smooth technique he had perfected on Sarah's granola bar, Wellington gently but firmly took hold of the pastry with his lips and lifted it right out of the man's hand. The businessman stood there holding his now empty hand in the air, staring at Wellington, who was happily chewing his stolen breakfast pastry. The crowd of tourists erupted in laughter and applause at Wellington's second successful heist of the morning. "Did that horse just steal my Danish?" the businessman asked, looking around as if hoping someone would tell him he was imagining things. "Welcome to London," laughed an elderly tourist from Ireland. "You've just been robbed by royalty." Wellington was thoroughly enjoying his pastry, which was even better than the granola bar. The flaky crust and sweet filling were exactly what a hard-working horse deserved, in his opinion. He chewed slowly and deliberately, maintaining eye contact with his victim as if to say, "Thank you for the donation." Private Thompson was now trying very hard not to laugh out loud. His horse had gone completely rogue and was apparently planning to eat every tourist snack in London. While it was definitely not proper guard protocol, Thompson had to admit that Wellington's technique was impressive. The businessman, after getting over his initial shock, began to see the humor in the situation. "Well, I guess that's one way to start the morning," he said, pulling out his phone to take a picture of Wellington finishing his pastry. "Wait until I tell my wife that a royal horse mugged me for breakfast." Wellington's success was now attracting attention from beyond just the immediate crowd of tourists. Other guards and police officers in the area had noticed the gathering crowd and were beginning to investigate what was causing so much excitement and laughter. Brigadier, the other royal horse, had been watching Wellington's adventures with what could only be described as professional jealousy. Brigadier was generally more serious and well-behaved than Wellington, but seeing his colleague get praise and treats for stealing food was beginning to influence his thinking. A group of teenagers approached with bags of chips, and Wellington immediately locked onto them like a radar system. But this time, Brigadier also showed interest, his head turning toward the chips with newfound curiosity about this tourist food acquisition technique. Private Davies felt his horse's attention shift and realized that Wellington's bad influence was spreading. "Oh no, Brigadier," he whispered, "don't you start too." But it was too late. Brigadier had decided that if Wellington could successfully obtain snacks from tourists, there was no reason he shouldn't try the same technique. The two horses began to work together, with Wellington approaching from one side and Brigadier from the other, effectively surrounding the teenagers with their bags of chips. "They're working together," shouted one of the tourists who had been filming the entire incident. "The horses are coordinating their attack." The teenagers found themselves in the middle of what could only be described as a very polite but determined horse mugging. Wellington and Brigadier approached slowly and calmly, but their intent was absolutely clear. They wanted those chips, and they were prepared to use their considerable charm and persistence to get them. "Should we run?" asked one of the teenagers, looking nervously between the two massive horses who were now close enough that they could feel their warm breath. "I don't think you can outrun royal horses," replied his friend, trying to hold his chips out of reach while also taking selfies with the approaching horses. The situation had now evolved from a single mischievous horse to a coordinated effort by both royal horses to liberate snacks from unsuspecting tourists. Private Thompson and Private Davies exchanged glances that clearly communicated their mutual realization that their horses had gone completely off script. Wellington, emboldened by his previous successes and now with backup from Brigadier, was ready to attempt his most ambitious food heist yet. The teenagers had multiple bags of different snacks, and Wellington's expert nose had identified at least 3 different flavors that needed immediate investigation. The crowd of tourists was now actively cheering for the horses, treating the entire incident like a live entertainment show. People were calling friends and family to describe what they were witnessing, and social media was beginning to buzz with photos and videos of the royal horses who had turned into professional food bandits. The situation had reached peak chaos when Sergeant Major Harrison arrived on the scene. Harrison was a veteran with over 20 years of experience managing the King's Guard, and he had seen almost everything during his career. But he had never seen 2 royal horses working together to systematically rob tourists of their breakfast snacks. "What in blazes is going on here?" Sergeant Major Harrison asked as he approached the scene, though the answer was pretty obvious from the crowd of laughing tourists and the 2 horses who were currently investigating a family's picnic basket with intense concentration. Private Thompson and Private Davies both tried to maintain their official posture, while their horses continued their food liberation mission. "Sir, the horses seem to have developed an interest in tourist snacks," Thompson reported, which was probably the most diplomatic way to describe what was actually happening. Wellington had successfully negotiated a bag of crisps from one of the teenagers and was now working on opening it, using the same technique he had perfected with the granola bar wrapper. Brigadier, meanwhile, had convinced a small child to share her apple by the simple method of looking extremely pitiful and charming. Sergeant Major Harrison surveyed the scene and made a command decision that would go down in King's Guard history. Instead of trying to restore order immediately, he stepped back and allowed the horses to finish their current snack acquisitions while he assessed the situation. "Well," Harrison said to himself, watching Wellington successfully extract crisps from their bag while Brigadier crunched happily on his apple, "this is definitely not in the training manual." The crowd of tourists had grown to over 50 people, all taking photos and videos of the royal horses' feeding frenzy. Social media notifications were pinging constantly as people shared the incredible footage of Wellington and Brigadier's transformation from dignified royal horses to opportunistic snack bandits. Sarah, who had started the whole adventure, was now being interviewed by other tourists who wanted to know how she felt about being the first victim of Wellington's food theft career. "Honestly, it's the best thing that's happened on my entire trip," she said, still grinning widely. "I came here expecting to see some nice horses and take a few photos. I never expected to be robbed by royalty." Wellington had finished his crisps and was now eyeing a hot dog that a tourist was eating about 10 feet away. But Sergeant Major Harrison decided that the show had gone on long enough. He approached Wellington with the authority of someone who had been managing difficult horses for decades. "Wellington," Harrison said in a firm but not angry voice, "that's quite enough entrepreneurship for one morning." Wellington looked at Harrison with the expression of a horse who knew he had been caught but wasn't particularly sorry about it. His ears were forward and his eyes were bright with satisfaction from his successful morning of snack acquisition. Harrison reached into his pocket and pulled out horse treats that he always carried for emergencies. "If you and Brigadier want snacks, you ask me, not the tourists," he said, offering each horse a proper treat. Both horses accepted their official treats graciously, though Wellington kept one eye on the tourist with the hot dog just in case. An opportunity presented itself. Private Thompson finally felt comfortable enough to speak normally. "Sir, I'm sorry about Wellington's behavior. He started with one granola bar and then it just escalated." "Don't apologize, Thompson," Harrison replied, patting Wellington's neck. "This is probably the best public relations the King's Guard has had in years. Look at these people. They're having the time of their lives." And Harrison was absolutely right. The tourists weren't complaining about their stolen snacks. They were treating it like the most entertaining show they had ever seen. People were already planning to come back the next day, hoping to witness more of Wellington's antics. "I'm definitely telling everyone back home about this," said the businessman who had lost his Danish pastry. "I mean, who else can say they've been personally robbed by a royal horse? This is going straight on my social media." A news reporter who happened to be in the area had caught wind of the story and was now interviewing witnesses about the great royal horse snack heist of Tuesday morning. The story was already being picked up by local news stations and was trending on social media with hashtags like "Shang Wellington the Thief" and "Damn Royal Horse Heist." Wellington seemed to understand that he had become famous. He stood a little taller and posed naturally whenever cameras were pointed in his direction. His earlier mischievous expression had been replaced by one of dignified satisfaction, as if stealing tourist snacks was simply part of his royal duties. Brigadier, meanwhile, was already planning his next snack acquisition mission. He had discovered that his more serious and professional appearance made tourists less suspicious of his intentions, which could be a significant advantage in future food liberation operations. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah approached. "Private Thompson, one more time. Thank you for letting Wellington have my granola bar," she said. "This has been absolutely incredible. I came here expecting a normal tourist photo, and instead I got to be part of the best story I'll ever have." "Wellington seems to have that effect on people," Thompson replied with a smile. "He's been surprising us for 2 years now, but this morning definitely topped all his previous adventures." Harrison made the decision to let both horses finish their current shift, but with strict instructions that any future snack acquisition needed to go through official channels. "We can't have you two turning into a tourist mugging operation," he told the horses, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely displeased with the morning's entertainment. As the excitement died down, Wellington settled back into his official guard position, though he kept scanning the area for potential snack opportunities. His brief career as a food bandit had been incredibly successful, and he wasn't ready to give up the lifestyle entirely. The story of Wellington's snack heist spread quickly through London's tourist community. By afternoon, people were coming, specifically to see the famous food-stealing royal horse. Some visitors even brought extra snacks, hoping to recreate the magic of the morning's events. Sarah spent the rest of her London vacation telling the story to anyone who would listen. The photos and videos she took became the highlights of her trip, and she found herself becoming somewhat of a local celebrity among other tourists who wanted to hear firsthand about her encounter with Wellington. Wellington's fame continued to grow over the following days. Tour guides began including his story in their presentations, and souvenir shops started selling t-shirts with slogans like "I survived Wellington's snack attack" and "Royal Horse Food Inspector." Private Thompson found that his partnership with Wellington had become much more interesting after the snack incident. Wellington remained well-behaved during official duties, but Thompson could always sense his horse's awareness of nearby food opportunities. Their relationship had developed a new dimension of mutual understanding and amusement. Years later, Sarah would still tell the story of her encounter with Wellington whenever anyone asked about her trip to London. The granola bar that she had, forgotten in her pocket, had led to one of the most memorable and hilarious experiences of her life. Wellington himself seemed to understand that he had achieved a special kind of fame. While he returned to his professional guard duties, he retained a certain twinkle in his eye and an awareness of his status as the royal horse who had successfully turned tourist snack theft into an art form. The incident became part of Kingsguard folklore, and new guards were often told the story of Wellington's great snack heist as an example of how even the most dignified situations could take unexpected and delightful turns. And somewhere in Ohio, Sarah's friends and family still laugh every time they see the photos of Wellington triumphantly holding her granola bar, proof that sometimes the best travel memories come from the most unexpected moments.